master. We'll look at all of the things that Yeshua has actually said and the situations that caused him to speak. This time, we're going to look at the tribute to Caesar. The tribute to Caesar, which is Matthew 22, 15 through 22. Also, Mark chapter 12, 13 through 17, and Luke 20, verse 20 through 26. We're basically going to read Matthew's version. All three accounts seem to be basically saying the exact same thing. I think there's an additional thing that's mentioned in Luke, which we'll mention, but for the most part, we'll go through the Matthew's account and talk about it. So, if we can read Matthew 22 and read
22.
verses 15 through 22.
Matthew 22, verse 15. Then the Pharisees went and plotted how to trap him in his words. And they sent to him their top ones with the Herodians, saying, Teacher, we know that you are true, and teach the way of Elohim in truth, and it does not concern you about anyone, for you are not partial to any man. Then say to us, what do you think? Is it right to pay taxes to Caesar or not? But knowing their wickedness, Yeshua said, why do you try me, you hypocrites? Show me the coin of the tax. And they brought him a denarius. And he said to them, whose likeness and inscription is this? They said to him, Caesar's. And he said to them, then give to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to Elohim what is Elohim's. And having heard, they marveled and left him and went away.
Okay, very good. And also, let's just add to that verse, chapter Luke 20, verse 20.
Right, Luke 20, verse 20. And keeping a close watch on him, they sent spies who pretended to be righteous to catch him in a word, in order to deliver him to the rule and the authority of the governor.
Okay, very good. So it's interesting. We can just start here and move over back to Matthew. It's interesting when we look at Luke's version because it adds this part kind of at the front of everything that Yeshua at this point, they said that they sent spies who pretended to be righteous to catch him in a word in order to deliver him to the rule and to the authority of the governor. And so you have these plots and these plans by these pretenders with these wicked intentions and motivations. And so let's go back to Matthew 22 and see who these players even are. Because it's interesting, we see there's an interesting pairing that come together here with these people who are keeping a close watch on him and spying and pretending to be righteous. The Pharisees, of course, the Pharisees are always, trying to catch Yeshua in a trap. At this point, we've seen numerous occasions of the Pharisees working against Yeshua and trying to ask him these hard, quote unquote, hard questions, and trying to catch him in a lie, and to get him to say things that would cause people to stop, following him so vigorously, right? Here, plug that in. Okay, and so if we look over here, when we look at 15 and 16, it says the Pharisees, they plotted against him, but they're joining forces with also the Herodians. Now, the Herodians here are an interesting bunch, but it's interesting to understand that the Pharisees and the Herodians don't get along with one another. They do not get along with each other. They don't believe in the same things. If anything, the Herodians were more aligned with the Sadducees. The Herodians themselves were, in fact, political. They were politicians, essentially. They were Herodians because they were followers of, or propagators. I don't even want to say followers of. I want to say propagators of the thoughts and ideas of Herod. Herod, the original Herod. At this point, we're dealing with second generation Herods, but the original Herod was not even an Israelite. He was from Edom, and he converted to Judaism. He converted to the ways. Now it's interesting that when we look at these Herodians and the kind of the thoughts and ideas of the Herodians, if we go back and think about Israel and its relationship with like the Roman, these foreign people that kind of ruled their situation. If you go back to like the Maccabee times, where the leaders and the governing nations, they basically just kind of put their thoughts and ideas into Israel and basically made them do what they wanted to do, and which came how the whole Maccabee situation came about and all of that. But by the time you get up to now and these days and times with these Herodians, their things are more subtle things that happen, where it's not as if there are these things that are mandated or kind of nationally forced upon the people, but they came up with these things that like for instance, they built these entertainment centers that were like around Jerusalem or nearby Jerusalem, where they did all of their their little games and things, where they fought each other naked and did all of their
The Herodians?
the people in power, the Romans,
Yeah.
and the Herodians were like the propagators of this way. And so the Herodians are they're like politicians. And so the they kind of said, well, it's nice to be with these people over here.
Trying to integrate.
Yes.
Integrators.
Yes,
like,
yes.
Yeah.
They were kind of the propagators of this message of, we want to kind of be a part of our oppressors and not a part of them.
Yeah.
But the difference is that these people were like the aristocrats. These people were like the higher ups, and so they're trying to get the common folk to want to live a life that's connected to. It's essentially causing them to be a part of something that really doesn't make sense to them. Like if you're like a higher up person and you have wealth and all of these things, maybe it makes sense for you to have these particular thoughts and ideas, but the common people, it don't work for them. But again, and so when Josephus, when he talks about the things that Herod institutes and that the Herodians propagate, he talks about these Greco-Roman games that include idolatrous and immoral elements, but it's like you're not mandated to do the things. Where it's different than like the Maccabean times where they're like, you got to do this. Here in this time, they offer these things that seem innocent, but they have all of these pagan things incorporated in them. And so they have all of these, they erect these images and statues in various places that people might even worship. Israel probably wouldn't or shouldn't, but it's almost like if it's there, maybe I'll give it a try kind of a thing. And so it's like they have all of these customs that are put into place that would entice the people to do all of these things that are contrary to the Most High. They didn't mandate the things, but they made them so common that it became kind of a thing where it could potentially pull someone in a particular direction.
Like Christmas and Halloween.
Just like today, I was about to say, just like everything they got going today. These different.
Yeah. And so the Herodians are these ones who are propagating this thing. And then so the Pharisees, because they have this this thing in their mind where they want to get Yeshua, they incorporate them.
They work together.
They work in these people who are diametrically opposed to these people. They do not mess with the Herodians. The Pharisees don't. They're two different types of people. They believe in things that are just they don't agree with anything that these people do. But yet, their common goal here is to trap Yeshua in and causing him to do or say these things that would potentially get the people to stop following him. Because they couldn't just go and just get him. Because it would cause an uproar. The people will probably do something bad to them.
Yeah.
They had to sway the minds of the people in order to get their desired outcome. Thank you very much. Otherwise, they wasn't able to. They had to get Yeshua to say something that would cause the people to turn on him. They couldn't just make a ruling and say, this guy crazy, we got to get him out of here.
Yeah. They wanted, so the Herodians were higher up in the society, so they have more power. So if you went against what they said, which is against the system now, to them,
Yeah.
it's like bringing the IRS person to somebody and be like, should you write this off or do something? But you know this dude from the IRS and be like, nah, we gonna lock you going. That's what they trying to do it like the back.
Yeah, and when you talk about it like that, it makes it kind of brings it home, because literally these Herodians are the ones who they're so connected and tied in politically with Rome.
Mm-hmm.
And the things that they propagate, the things that they talk about is not what the Pharisees aren't on that. And so they talk about this whole thing about these things, this tribute to Caesar, taxes essentially. The Pharisees,
And
they
they
hate taxes. They don't like taxes. The tax collectors is the worst kind of people that they are, according to them.
Oh man.
And so, but the Herodians, they're about it.
Yep.
Now the Pharisees won't not pay their taxes now.
Right.
They're not the radical ones like the Zealots. The Zealots ain't paying no taxes. They say we ain't doing that.
Right. We'll fight.
The Pharisees,
Tea party.
the Pharisees are like, we don't want to do it, but this is where we at, so we got to do it.
Mm-hmm.
The Sadducees, they're connected politically, so they're about it like that. And then the Essenes, they're off somewhere else anyway, where they ain't nobody coming to where they're at to get no tax.
Right.
But it's interesting but the Pharisees, they don't want to pay the taxes. They pay them. They don't want to pay them. And they definitely wouldn't sit up here and try to get people to do so. Because it's interesting when you think about the social structure here. The Herodians, as you say, these are upper echelon people here. These are the ones who they're well off. The Herodians and the Sadducees are the same type of class, where they are, they're the higher ups. They're the people with positions and titles. Now, there was then you had the Pharisees, which probably kind of were like your middle class situation. They had respectable jobs, and they weren't kind of with the poor class, I would say. And then you had just the common folk, who probably just were farmers. They just did what they had to do or what have you. But the thing about the Pharisees is they weren't kind of commoner status. They were slightly above commoner status, but they had the respect of the people because you was able to talk to them. They was on the front lines. The Pharisees were. You couldn't just go and just deal with a Sadducee, say. They're lofty, high up. But the Pharisees, they was with the people. So they wasn't commoners, but they had the respect of the commoners because that's who they was able to see. Oh, yeah.
I was like, so when you're describing it, it makes me think about government when you have like your mayor, your city councilman, then you have your governor, state representatives, like there's certain people you have more access to.
Right. You're never going to see the president.
Washington, D.C. folks.
I know, but he was hanging out with the Pharisees. right? He was hanging out with
You couldn't get
he was
to
hanging
it.
out with the people that are in the middle class, right? And it was it was kind of a election year. So yes, I did see Biden. I remember that, yes. But you see where he came to though, right?
Here to come down to
He came down to that section where the middle class people will be at, right? But typically you don't see them people. And so if you think about it from that perspective, you can go see your neighborhood councilman. But I don't want to put it all the way on that section because the Pharisees, they wasn't connected politically.
yeah.
So it was kind of like that, but it's just a little bit different. The Pharisees was the people, the kind of the political movers and shakers in the community. I'm using the word political, but they wasn't political. They was the ones they maintained the kind of religious standards in the community. They did, but they weren't connected to the political side because those was the ones who was trying to allow for Rome's influence to take control of everything.
So it was like pastors.
They tax credits.
Yeah, I guess you could say that. Right, because when they had their schools and their synagogues in the places, they weren't the temple. The Pharisees weren't the temple people. Those was the Sadducees, and then that's how it was crooked because they was connected. The temple people was connected to the politicians, and so the Pharisees was the ones in the quote unquote neighborhoods, the satellite
It
places.
was within the synagogue system.
Yeah.
The shul.
Yeah, all of the different
Right.
schools and places that was outside, like that. And so they dealt with the everyday people. And so you have this situation where, but in order to achieve this goal, they go and get with these people who, again, they have these doctrines that's completely against what they believe in. And so it's interesting when we look at verse 16 and thinking about that in light of what is said in verse 20 of Luke chapter 20, with this whole idea of pretending to be righteous. But in verse 16 of Matthew, these people come together, these top ones. I just think about the fact that probably had the top students of the Pharisees, the ones the young go-getters that had all of the top doctrines together, the foot soldiers of the Pharisees. The young guys that was out there, they was ready to battle anybody on the scriptures. The top students.
Studied up one.
They was studied. They was the top of the class. And you also had these Herodians. Again, these ones that's they have all of their political views together that propagate these things, and they come together, and they probably had to do some talking to figure out what they was going to do to try to trap Yeshua. But the way that they begin to speak to him, where in 16, where it says, they even say to him, teacher. The King James says master right there, which I think the King James don't do it right, because when it says for them to go and call Yeshua master, we know that they don't look at him as their master. Right? They're the representatives of the Pharisees and the Herodians. So they have their master. But that word there is literally teacher. And so they're giving him, at least they're giving him the title to say that he is in fact a teacher, right? But this other things that they say that we know that you are true. You know, they're going with the sandwich effect. They're coming out and they're giving him all these accolades and trying to lean into his if he had one, his ego, and you fluff up his feathers and say, we know that you are true. We know that you teach the way of Elohim in truth. I don't know why they're saying, well, I know why they're saying all this, but they can't believe this stuff, what they're saying. But they're saying these words because I guess they don't really understand who he is, where they can't really butter up the master like this, like what they're trying to do.
Yeah, they think he a regular man, like a regular, regular. Nah, exactly.
If it was just a regular person for them to go and hit him like that, we would probably cause him to, have a little smile on his face. Like, yeah, you know what I do be out here saying what's true and all of that. That's what they wanted to happen.
Yeah.
But that's not what happened, right? But it's interesting, these things that they're saying, right? Because when you talk about this idea of them, when you look at truth, truth is, in the Hebrew, it's stability, right? It's trustworthiness. It's something that's right and sure.
Mm-hmm.
The word emet. And so this word, truth, to say that he is truth, if they really believe that Yeshua is true, then they would actually be doing the things that Yeshua talks about.
Mm-hmm.
And so for them to say what they're saying just causes them just to be alive.
Yep.
Because their motivation here is just to trip Yeshua up.
Yep.
And so we could know that when they go and they say that you are true, and we know that you teach the true words of Elohim, the way of Elohim, in truth, when they say that and then they don't do what he says, it just makes them out to be a lie.
Yeah. But even that question that they came up with, like, what's the purpose of that question?
Well,
you can, out of all things you can ask.
Yeah. Well, this is what they came up with. This is what they had to have had as some type of council together.
Mm-hmm.
And this, when they asked this question, they must have thought that this was the thing that they needed to ask to get the people to turn on. But it says, so they asked him the question, what do you think? Is it right? And so again, Pharisees, they of course, they paid their taxes, begrudgingly, but they did. They didn't like it. In fact, they probably hated it. And you know that based on how they dealt with the tax collectors, right? And we know that the Pharisees wasn't the ones who didn't pay taxes, because we know the ones who did not pay, which was the zealots. And so they're asking the question, but they pay their taxes though. But they're sitting up there trying to ask if he does it, because again, They want to do these things in the sight of the people to cause the people to turn on Yeshua. But when we look at 18, it talks about the fact that Yeshua knew their wickedness and calls them out and calls them hypocrites. Right? And so when we see the words that he's using, I mean, I guess he could always call them a hypocrite. But it helps us to understand that him calling them hypocrites in this specific scenario helps us to see that they're asking him about something that they themselves do.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And additionally, for them to even join themselves with the Herodians is hypocritical.
Mm-hmm.
Because these are the ones, the Pharisees are supposed to be the propagators of righteousness. But the Herodians are the propagators of unrighteousness. They're the propagators of this counter culture into a culture that's supposed to be closed off from those things that are outside. The Herodians are about this whole mixture of ideas and like a amalgamation of thoughts and ideas, and the Pharisees are supposed to be about set apartness. And so Yeshua calls them out and says, you a hypocrite by being with these people and by asking me this goofy question. And so when he says to them in verse 19, I wonder who's the people that got the coin. Wouldn't it be so funny if one of the Pharisees was the one that actually had the coin? I mean, the thing about it is that they live in a society where it's interesting that Yeshua says what he says, because when you think about this idea of giving unto Caesar that which is Caesar's, they live in this world that they can't control. Like they can't control the things that go on. They only just have kind of this semblance of control, which isn't control at all. You know, they got a whole situation set up at the temple where they take the regular Roman money and change it over into their currency to use it for their quote unquote holy purposes. But the simple fact that they have to even have that system set up shows that they live in this society, in this world, where there's things that they have to do, connections that they have to have that have to be made, where, you know, they have to do these things that, you know, someone could look at and have something to say about. But I think what Yeshua gets to whenever he says over here, it's interesting when he says in verse, read again in verse 20.
And he said to them, whose likeness and inscription is this?
He talks about the likeness, right? He talks about the likeness. And when we look at, if we was to go back to Genesis, if we was to go back to the first chapter of Genesis, where it talks about the fact that the Most High created Adam and Hava. You don't have to go back to it. In his likeness, in the Septuagint, that's the same word there. And so these things that are connected to, that are in the likeness of Caesar, they belong to him. They're his. These things that are connected to the world and the things of this world, they belong to the world. And so there's a due that is owed to them. So Yeshua, he don't take away from that. Give to Caesar what is his.
Mhm.
But then he also adds into Elohim what is his. Which he's saying a lot, but just saying that little piece right there to Elohim what is his. And he don't even go into it. But it said there, they heard what he said and they marveled at that. Because they're going behind, between the lines and understanding a thing that is pretty important. You know, because we live in this situation where, you know, and especially them and, you know, what they're sitting up here trying to do, they probably was able to see the hypocrisy in their own selves by even dealing with these people who really wants to implement all these things that are contrary to the Most High, contrary to the Torah.
Mhm.
You know, they talk about the fact that, in the Torah it talks about not having these foreign people ruling over them.
Mhm.
And so just by the simple fact of them having this relationship that they have with Rome is contrary to the Torah.
Mhm.
But in the situation that they're in, there's nothing that they can do about it.
Yep.
But for the Pharisees to sit up there and bring these people along and to add them to the situation is almost as if to say, you know, I'm all right with this arrangement.
They wicked. Wicked saints said. But knowing their wickedness.
Yeah. And so, but Yeshua being, kind of looking at this thing and dealing with it for what it is, understanding that, they're where they're at. Nobody's doing no coups over here. They're essentially, they're living a life that's like unto being in exile in the land.
Exactly. They're ruled over.
They're ruled over.
You're under Caesar, and Yeshua even knew that.
Yeah.
And he came, basically trying to show them why they under Caesar, and they still didn't get it.
Yeah. And so it's interesting that, again, Israel at this time is living a life that's like unto living in exile, but they're in the land. And so that being said, there's nothing that can be done. Give to him what's his. But you better give to Elohim what is his. And so in saying that, there also has to be kind of this separation where at some point, I think there's things to be said about some of these other factions and groups. When you think about those ones that kind of rebelled against society and all of that, they did that because in their mind, this thing was so wicked, it was so contrary to the Torah that they wasn't able to stand it, and they just was rebels against. To them, they're doing these things for holiness' sake. But it's really to no avail, because when we think about what the scriptures talk to us about, the things that they're looking for, the Messiah coming is the only one who's able to rectify these things anyway. And so for the people to get to that place of rebellion like where they were at, it almost denies the coming Messiah, because they want to take the place and be the deliverer instead of allowing for Messiah to come and do it. And so it's like you almost have kind of the idea in terms of, yes, we want to be separate, set apart from the people, but then at the same time, you're putting, the will in your hands instead of in the hands of the Most High.
Yeah. They weren't looking for him.
Yeah, yeah. And so I think that Yeshua helps us to see and understand, even to this day, that we have to function in this world that we live in this world that's not our own. We live in this world, but we're not of this world. These things, they have this money with these kings that die. All the kings on our money been dead. I mean presidents or whatever they are, right?
Some of them are presidents. Are they all?
Yeah, Ben Franklin wasn't no president.
Yeah, Ben Franklin wasn't.
Franklin, what's he on?
Was it 20?
Huh?
No, that's Benjamin.
That's
that's
on
20.
poor people asking that question.
Ben on the 20, right?
What's Ben Franklin on?
No, he's on 100.
That's the 100.
Yeah.
Who's on the 20?
20 is Hamilton, right?
Is it Hamilton? I don't know.
Jefferson.
We don't know who's on
Man,
the money.
I don't pay attention to them. I don't look at money no more.
Y'all funny. Y'all so holy, y'all don't know who's on the money.
Look.
But we live in this society that is contrary to the things that we believe in, but we're able to live inside of it and not forsake the things that we believe in. And I think that's what Yeshua is wanting for us to understand.
Everybody says all about the Benjamins, and I was interesting. I didn't know that's where that
That's
was.
so funny. That's so funny.
What I was thinking is when you said that to them, he was proving how just he is. Like I just see his justice and how we need to continue to, be like that while we're here. Like he allows the enemy to have this for a time. So it's just just. It's just how he is. He can't change. Well, now he can't change. And Yeshua is in the likeness of God.
Yeah.
It just, because I mean, we were like, even I were like, for him to say, yeah, you ain't gotta pay that. But justice shows how we should live and an example. And then all the other things.
I mean, yeah, because you think about it, like, okay, say you don't do it, and then like, where do it put you at? You know what I mean? Like, who do you help by this not paying Caesar what he's due? First of all, it's his anyway. People you don't want to pay your taxes, but you'll go somewhere and make money though.
I don't like paying taxes.
I know, but you
I never even told
you
him
give
that.
unto Caesar. It's his money that you using.
I never agreed.
You using his money,
I never signed.
so you better give him what he's due.
Then they think I'm so
You benefit from his freedoms that he gives you.
He's taking a little bit more.
You gonna take what he want to take, and you gonna give it to him, and you gonna be happy. Or else he gonna do something to you.
Put you in jail.
But then, but who you helping then, though?
I never agreed.
So Yeshua is saying, just give them what they owe, but give the Most High what He's owed. And so there's so much more incorporated in what it is that you give unto Elohim. Like these people, they sat up here and started this whole thing, and talking about the fact that Yeshua they said he is true.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if we start from there, understanding that he is in fact true, and then so for us, that means for us, that's our life. This is the way that we are to be conducting our lives by living a life that exemplifies what it is that Yeshua represents: rightness, goodness, holiness, justice, right? And so these people are sitting up here with their whole plan of they want to kill Messiah, right? Which is wicked. And so we have to be able to figure out ways to live our life for the Most High in this world that's contrary to the Most High, and continue to maintain the character of the Most High. Because again, when we look at some of these factions, and especially here the Pharisees, they're operating in a way that's directly opposite of what they should be exemplifying, which it totally smears your witness. Like, I can't go around and behave in a way that causes me to look like the most wickedest people that exist, and then at the same time be a representative of Yeshua at the same, like, simultaneous.
Not being set apart.
You got to be always set apart. You got to be always looking like a follower of Messiah. Not just when it benefits you. Not just when it causes you to look a certain kind of way or put you in a certain light. Sometimes is going to have you in an uncomfortable position. But you still have to be that representative of Messiah, irregardless. And so it's interesting when we look here at Yeshua, where, you know, they tried to sit up here and make Yeshua, look a certain kind of way, and Yeshua, as always, huh?
He turned it back to them.
Yes, he turned it right back to them. And so I think that for us, what we learn is that, you know, there has to be kind of this evenness with us in terms of the way that we behave. We can't, you know, compromise our connection and representation for Messiah for any reason. If he's true, if we say that he is true, if we say that he teaches the way of Elohim, then he wasn't out here just doing whatever and moving in and out of, uprightness, depending on where he was. He always maintained, his light. And so we also have to also maintain that light, wherever we are.
Yep.
Okay. Does anybody have any thoughts, questions, or comments about any of that? What? I don't know. Oh, the coins.
Caesar's given to Caesar what's his.
Oh.
Was they actually Caesar's?
Well, it's just the faces on the money. Just like if you have a quarter, it got George Washington on it, which is a representative of the government, which is a representative of the nation that we live in. And so we sit up here and use this money that's connected to these people, and they do all these nefarious things to even acquire wealth and moving around and all of these things, and you don't like, I don't co-sign on the actions and deeds of the nation I live in by spending the money.
Right.
I'm just living my life, and this is how I get things. I don't care how separate you want to be in America. You can only be but so separate.
Right.
I mean, like if you try to go to the store with gold or silver,
I mean, that might work,
Mom
but
and pop.
it ain't guaranteed to work.
I mean, like if I go to Costco and I say
Oh, at Costco, it ain't doing nothing at
I have
Costco.
gold coins, that
They're gonna be like, you need to go to the exchange place and get
They
some
said-
greenbacks and come back.
We need some money.
Now, if you go down to the neighbor or something like that and get, this is worth, a whole bunch of stuff. Like you can do that but I'm saying there's only so far that could go. And so we're placed in this position where we're not being judged based on that.
Right.
We're in a position where we have this nation that's over us, and we got to live inside of this nation and function. And the things that belong to him, we give it back to him because it belongs to him anyway. But at the same time, the things that belong to the Most High, we give those things to the Most High. And so we have to live in this world and function inside of it without compromising the Most High and the things that He requires of us. And I think really that's kind of the whole gist of this whole encounter here. All right. Okay. So that being said, if nobody has any more questions or comments, we should be done for now. Y'all willing? We'll be back on next Shabbat to continue with our look at the words of the Master and also the Torah portion. So, being said, until next week, we'll say Shabbat Shalom.
Shalom.